Hello, my friends. This is Deepak, and I have the great pleasure of speaking to Ananta Ripa Ajmera, and this is her book, The Way of the Goddess. And I've been reading it and enjoying it thoroughly. And so I decided let's have a conversation with the author. So thank you for joining us, Ananta.
Oh, thank you so much, Deepak ji, for having me. It's such an honor to be able to connect with you this way.
Thank you. I've enjoyed the book. I went through most of it, but I think I need to go through it again a little more diligently. But it was very interesting to read about your life and your transformation and where you are right now. So we'll talk about the book in a bit, but why don't you share your journey a little bit, your childhood, and how this happened, because this was a process.
Yes, absolutely. It was definitely a process. My childhood was an interesting one, growing up as one of the only Indian American people in Toledo, Ohio, where I used to go to the Hindu temples as part of our family practice. And it was a way to feel a sense of community, I believe, for my parents to be in a new country, discovering a new pathway, and to be able to connect with fellow immigrants on the path was something that they found a lot in the Hindu temples. My mother has always been very spiritually inclined. So ever since I was in her womb, she was always chanting mantras, and I grew up with that. And yet I never understood it. It was very confusing, as I imagine it may have been for your children also growing up as Indian in America. And to try to put the two together was a constant struggle, so much so that when I was a child, I basically rejected a lot of the Indian culture just because I knew I couldn't understand it at that time. But the consciousness within me knew also that this is something very profound. And even though I don't understand it yet, one day I will, and this will become very important to me. And one day I will come back full circle to this, and I will finally understand it. And it will be something that I will feel so grateful to have. And then I just left it at that. And I would look at the statues in the temple and just feel so frustrated and so confused that I set it all aside for some time. We used to go to India often when I was growing up, and I think I was always struck by the contrast of life in India versus all the privileges that I had as an American growing up in the United States. I knew deep down inside that I am here for a purpose. Ever since childhood, I felt that I'm here to serve. And this is a lifetime for service. This is my lifetime to give back. I feel that it was going to India that really imprinted that in me because I could see just how privileged I was to grow up in the States with a lot more material comforts than even some of my relatives had in India. And I feel that those seeds of going to those temples, of hearing the mantras, of being exposed to this tradition, while it didn't make any sense at all in childhood, really became such an important catalyst for my personal transformation journey. It was really asking myself a certain question that, instead of looking at social entrepreneurship, which is what I was immersed in as a college student, as finding a way to create pattern breaking, sustainable, scalable change in the world, I decided to ask myself, how do I create pattern breaking changes in my life in a way that I can sustain those changes? And then, having gone through some transformation, be able to scale that to the world. And yoga and Ayurveda became the answers to my question. And so I really believe in the power of planting seeds and also in the importance of asking the right questions.
Very good. As I was reading your book, I was actually surprised. I shouldn't have been, but that there was a very vibrant Indian or even Hindu community of all places, Toledo, Ohio. Uh, Another thing that struck me, and I should have not been surprised, is that we think of Indian culture as sacred, and it is, and but yet there's a lot of trauma in Indian families, a lot of abuse, a lot of domestic and sexual violence, and you referred to that a bit here, and how you heal from it. And the other thing also, that India is a land of contradictions. While you have this amazing insight into the divine feminine, there's a lot of injustice in gender injustice in India, a lot of violence against women in India. And sometimes it's difficult to reconcile that. And yet that's how humans are. We're full of contradictions and ambiguity, and both the sacred and the profane exist in us at all times. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a life. After all experiences by contrast. You can't have an up without a down, or a hot without a cold, pleasure without pain. So, leaving that aside, I've been a student of the divine feminine in many traditions, including the Greek traditions, which are as rich as our tradition, the Indian tradition. So I've always looked at leadership through the divine feminine, and taught the divine feminine courses, basically through Greek mythology and goddesses. And I think of gods and goddesses as symbolic representations of the infinite divine, which we cannot conceptualize. So we have to create some symbolic representation. And even the symbol and the stories that go with the symbol empower us. So, my teaching on leadership has focused on Hera and Aphrodite and Artemis and all the other amazing goddesses in Greek mythology, including Persephone, Hestia, etc. So it was very refreshing to see that there's a book now that takes the Indian archetypes, and you've done an amazing job at putting together what I think not only the symbolic representation and the themes of these goddesses, but also practices like taking inventory, doing rituals, incorporating breathing, yoga, mudras, etc. So, because of our time limitations, why don't we go through each of these as aspects of the divine feminine that we can all use, whether we are men or women, to empower us. So let's start. And this, be free to say anything, but refer to the book, and then we don't want to give away too much, because I think people need to buy the book and read it and empower themselves with the practices. So let's start with Shailputri.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much. That really was such a wonderful summary of a lot of my own questions that also brought about this book. That why is it that we worship the goddess Lakshmi in all the temples, and yet here was a girl I met named Lakshmi in India who had gone through so much violence in her life? And why is it that we can't find that goddess within ourselves and within all living beings? I'm really glad that you said not just women, but also men and people of all genders. People of all genders, all religious backgrounds can really benefit from this journey. And let's do our best to go through it very briefly. The goddess Shailaputri is the embodiment of Mother Earth, Mother Nature. She is the earth element within us that roots us to the earth. I love the Navratri nine goddess tradition and how it seamlessly integrates Ayurveda with yoga and Vedanta philosophy. So, in the first five goddesses of this tradition, there is a connection with an element that we are acknowledging in Ayurveda and now quantum physics also. And so, we begin with the most gross earth element with goddess Shailaputri. And in the first chakra, we are on the beginning stages of our hero's journey. The fact that we even go on this journey is a heroic thing. And I feel that the practices in the first chapter, which are about giving you stability, helping you root yourself into the earth, are in a sense the hardest because it requires stripping away all those layers of identification with our job, with our body, with our gender, with our socioeconomic status, with all these external identity markers, with our relationships. And what we have an invitation through our divine Mother Earth to do is to start to let go of those identifications and start to ourselves back into the ground of existence and to really thank Mother Earth as the first step to embarking on this journey to understand the divine mystery of this earth and of this life. And once we have established that grounding and that connection through eating more stabilizing foods, through thanking Mother Earth, through even just rooting our feet into Mother Earth, then we are ready for a very challenging next step, which is led by Goddess Brahmacharini, who dwells in the sacral chakra. And Goddess Brahmacharini is the one who follows the protocol of brahmacharya, which is the path of self-control and really learning to channel our emotional, creative, and sexual energy into a higher ideal to be able to anchor ourselves in. And at a practical level, this also helps a lot with better discernment of partnerships because the relationships that we keep, especially the intimate relationships, will have a really profound effect on our health, on our mind, and our body and our spirit. So we are really advised so much in the Vedic spiritual tradition to really practice self-control and restraint of the senses. This isn't to say there's no enjoyment on the path. There actually only can be pleasure when we're able to control the amount of consumption we take in through our senses. So this step is really about connecting with the weapons of this goddess, which are non weapons in a tangible sense, but they are a rosary bead of a mala, which is basically a bunch of beads on which we chant mantras and connect with a subtle sound vibration to be able to channel any anxious and lethargic energy into something more rarefied and something that's going to help us connect with our innermost self. We also are introduced to this beautiful practice of cleansing with water. So you'll see Goddess Brahmachari is holding a copper vessel, and that is for allowing us to be cleansed by the water element. The water element is connected to our emotions, and it's also connected to the ocean of emotion, or the ocean of samsara, as we call it in Vedanta. And we need to really be able to work with that energy so that it doesn't devour us, so that we can become the master instead of the servant of our senses. It's a really, really important step. And I feel a lot of yogis don't get to hear as much about as I feel we should. And I feel it would really support people in the yoga community to know that.
As you were
And
speaking about brahmacharya,
mhm,
it is, I think, common observation that the most trauma I've seen in people, the most karmic, um, traumatic experiences and the karmic entangles
mhm.
come from personal relationships and
Yeah,
melodrama around personal relationships. So I think one can enjoy sexuality and spirituality as fundamental energies of the universe if we are responsible and
yes.
value driven. And so I think Brahmacharini is a very good teacher for that. Keep going on. Chandra Ghanta.
Yes, and then once we've managed our emotions and won that battle in the second chakra, we move into the Manipura chakra, the sacral chakra, the incredible place where digestion is happening on all different levels. I love how you talk about it as a metabolic process. And in Ayurveda, it's so intelligent that we learn that we don't just digest our food, we have to digest information. We have to digest these emotions that our traumatic life experiences bring about for us. And when we can really focus on integrating all of this digestion of our food, digestion of information, digestion of our emotions, and digestion of the experiences that have left an imprint upon us in our memory field, then what we're able to do is really ignite that fire of sacred transformation within, which will not only give us access to radiant, glowing health, but it will actually empower us to then move upward on our journey through the chakras and to really face all the demons, because this is a chakra where we're connecting with the fire element. And fire is a very sacred element in our Vedic spiritual tradition because it's illuminating. It's the power of the sun. Sun is the greatest representation of fire. And we all have this fire within us that empowers us to allow even anger, for example, which can be connected with a more out of control version of fire, to become something that we channel into power by connecting it with wisdom. And we are able to connect with two different kinds of digestion, physical digestion and even Gnanagni, as we call it, which allows us to digest the knowledge of the higher truths of life, which are at a more subtle level. So this is a really important place of transformation. And I share my story about transforming intergenerational trauma and a lot of fear that I had, and about how important it was for me as a woman to be able to develop a healthier relationship with anger so that I wasn't suppressing it, but I wasn't going out of control with it. And I was no longer hurting myself with it by internalizing it. So this is a place where you can truly face your fears and become extremely courageous and powerful.
So here's a beautiful illustration of the fire of transformation, Agni. It's interesting that the word Agni is related to the English word ignite or ignition.
Yes.
So we are metabolizing not just food, but all experience, and not only metabolizing, but digesting experience into healthy pathways, ultimately to create ojas, the elixir of immortality, as it's called. Okay, move on to the fourth chakra now, if you can, and you call her Kushmanda. So that's the love and abundance aspect, also associated with Lakshmi as well, right?
It's the first form of goddess Lakshmi. So the first three goddesses are the form of Kali, who is the very fierce and ferocious goddess who all together represents transformation. She's so powerful that she's expressed actually in three different forms. And it's all about the ego and also
Destroyer
our,
of ignorance, right? She's the
yes,
destroyer of ignorance.
exactly, exactly. And it's more of our physical connection, right? So a lot of these things that we're going through in the first three chapters are more about our physical connection to the earth and the physical dimension. And then as we move into the heart with Goddess Kushmanda, we're going into the mind, we're going into the more subtle realm, we're going into the heart. And so here it is really important to feel as a way to heal. And when we are evoking the power of abundance, I love that Kushmanda herself is depicted as smiling, and she is said to be the genesis of the universe, who laughed the universe into existence. And her big message for us is that we are going to be our most creative when we are laughing versus when we are getting stressed out. So it's really important at this stage to really love yourself and to know that your true self with a capital S is the same in all living beings. And so it changes our whole relationship. A lot of times as empaths who are feeling the emotions of others, we forget that we also are a part of the equation, right? And that we also need to love ourselves as we would another. And then we'll be able to love another much better, having loved ourselves properly. So it's really important to be with our beautiful hearts, to honor it in many different ways that I share about through roses, through laughter, through music, and to be able to get into a space where we're able to fill ourselves up emotionally such that we can create in the world from a place where we're not seeking something from what we're doing, but we're actually able to overflow with that abundance into the world.
It's very interesting right now as I watch all these politicians running for election, not just here, all over the world. I've never seen any of these potential leaders who are all gangsters, actually, in my opinion, you know, national leaders or whatever, all over the world. I never see them smile or crack a joke or laugh. And I think that's the first sign that you can't trust these people. Anybody who's so serious all the time is obviously defending their ego and promising you
Yeah.
abundance, and yet they don't have the fullness of that abundance in them. Okay, Skandamata.
So once we've opened our heart, then it's time to connect with the goddess who is living in the throat chakra as the power of voice. And it's so interesting because when we talk about liberating the power of your voice and the power of your most authentic expression, it's actually a process that truly begins in silence, in the place where we are beyond words and where we are able to really be with ourselves and be with whatever emotions may come up in that space to really not identify with them, not react to them, but finally start to acknowledge them, to observe them, to be in awareness of them, and to start to work with them in such a way that we're not just rewriting old conditioning and scripts, but we are actually really empowered through cultivating the power of silence, even for little pockets of time every day, to begin to rewrite our deep subconscious scripts and psychological programming that we may have inherited from many generations. So, this is a really, really powerful practice of connecting with silence so that you're able to feel whatever emotions need to be feel, to reflect, and then that process of reflection to build up your conviction, and through conviction develop the power of courage, which then leads to expression. And we are really supported by the goddess in the form of a biological mother in this particular step of the process. So after goddess Kushmanda gives birth to the whole universe through the heart chakra, then only does she move on to become a biological mother of the warrior baby Skanda. And that warrior baby Skanda is a hero. He's a warrior. He's a very powerful being. And we become like that baby Skanda when we take the time to nurture our own inner child through the sacred womb of silence, from which our words can then be born from silence and really carry the most power.
In both the Vedic tradition, but also Buddhist tradition, and also actually the Greek mythologies, there's always a reference to right speech as the one of the aspects of liberation.
Yes.
And Saraswati is, of course, the goddess of speech as well. So I guess she's related to Skandmata, or maybe not, but that is, you would know more than I. In the Greek mythology, that's Athena, speech, culture, music, art, and all of that. So there is a connection on how we can use speech to embrace culture, art, music, science, and much more, actually, as not only liberating ourselves but liberating the culture, entire culture. Is there a connection between Saraswati and Kushnanda, or they're parallel goddesses? I'm asking you.
I believe they're more parallel. I mean, in the very traditional understanding, I believe that the Kushmanda, Skandamata, Katyayani are more like Lakshmi. And then Saraswati is more of the next three chakras. But there is a deep connection between Mahagauri in the 8th chakra, and Kushmanda in the 4th chakra. So they are all deeply interrelated for sure. And there's definitely Saraswati coming through the speech and through all creative expressions.
So talk about the remaining goddesses, Katyayani and Kalaratra, and then you have actually eighth and ninth chakras too.
Yes.
Please elaborate a little bit here, because most people are not familiar with the eighth and ninth chakras.
Sure. Yes. Yes. So after we have liberated the power of our voice through the power of silence, connecting with our speech, then we move on to the next form of the goddess, who is known as Katyayani. Katyayani is where the warrior part of Durga really comes into action through fighting off demons. So this is where the battle sequence really intensifies in an outer demon sense. These demons that this warrior mother goddess Durga is fighting through all the 9 chakras to awaken the spiritual superpowers within these chakras are all symbolic of the demons we have to fight within ourselves, right? Because before we have a conflict with another being, we would have a conflict within ourselves and within our own minds and our own emotions. We have to battle our anger, our fear, our insecurities to be able to really become the sovereign master of our lives and to emerge as the hero of our own journey. So when we're talking about outer demons and even having to set boundaries, which is what the 6th chakra is really about, then we are actually needing to really cultivate our intuition and to be able to recognize that even as we may need to set limits and say no on the outside to someone else, that someone else, no matter how much they may have transgressed our boundaries, is none other but ourselves. And when we have come to that intuitive realization, we're able to make a lot more fragrant boundaries than what are traditionally thought of as boundaries, right? Where you put a iron fence or something with a lot of thorns. Here, a rose naturally has thorns, right? So a rose is beautiful, a rose is fragrant, and that's how this goddess is, and that's how we all are at our essence. And sometimes some thorns are needed as protection, but they come with a beauty. They come with a fragrance that comes from an internal recognition of that oneness that we all share. And so I do share some ancient conflict resolution strategies here. And it always begins with trying your best to come to a shared understanding and to be able to try to negotiate. And if you can't negotiate, to try to let go of something, to give something to the other. And if still there's some struggle and push and pull, then only then to separate. And only even after separation, if there's no resolution, is it time to really put some, stronger action into place. So I think it has very practical purposes for our day-to-day conflicts and challenges also, and really points to the importance of constantly searching for that ability to see and remember the divine self in oneself and in all others.
And you have Kalaratri and eighth and ninth goddesses added on here, right?
Yes, yes. So then we move from here with our healthy boundaries restored and our chest and our inner guru awakened. We move into the Saraswati realm, which is started by goddess Kalaratri, who is dark as the night, who is very scary, and she is having a lot of blood because the demons that she's battling have now multiplied. And every time she is conquering them, they drop their blood cells onto the ground, and that blood cell becomes another demon. So it's quite an intense battle here in the 7th chakra, where we are really talking about the power of truth. The power of truth. Truth sets us free. Truth is difficult to look at. Truth is actually God. It is beauty. It is light itself. And so even though in the beginning I was really terrified of Goddess Kalaratri, as I went through understanding more and more about this tradition through the oral lineage tradition I received this knowledge in, I really came to love Kalaratri as the one who dispels all the illusions. And this is where we really are going beyond our conditioning and we're going beyond our identification with the body. So we are really affirming who we are beyond this body, our true self, our true identity, and really being able to remember to connect with that in others. A lot of times we're afraid of losing people in life because we're connected or attached at a physical dimension. And yet we understand in the Vedanta spiritual philosophy that we're eternal beings. We're on an infinite journey. And even when we leave this physical body, our soul continues on. And when we can connect with that soul in another who we love or who we're attached to or who we may have lost, then we recognize that that connection doesn't die, it only changes forms. And it really helps to alleviate a lot of the suffering that we do have based on attachments. So this is a place where we're really encouraged to read sacred texts and to listen to satsangas and the teachings of the truths from all the great masters, and to really reinforce those truths into our being. And it may be a bloody battle to recognize that we have created some of our own monsters through our false perceptions. But once we see that, it's like, oh, that's painful. But oh, wow, that's freeing. That's helpful. That's amazing. And so I feel she's the most loving mother of all the goddesses. And once we've gone through that dark night of the soul of awakening of all of our illusions and dispelling them, then we are blessed with a beautiful new beginning. And this is represented by the eighth goddess in the eighth chakra, which is considered just above the crown chakra. It's considered an astral chakra. Eighth and ninth are both astral chakras. And what we have here is the goddess transformed completely from this fierce, ferocious battle mode into an 8-year-old girl. And that is representing the eternal rejuvenation that we experience when we connect with our true self, with higher knowledge, with the wisdom that in the seventh chakra has set us free. Then we have a real new beginning, and our inner child is liberated, and we are able to really start afresh, to plant new seeds, literally and figuratively in our lives. This is a place and a day and a time where you get to really play with the universe and be in a cosmic Leela or a cosmic dance with the whole world, and to really see things from a new perspective, which is the perspective of the knower of the field. And we are knowing this whole field of consciousness in a very different way after having gone through this journey step by step to awaken these different powers within us, to then truly be able to have a new kind of fun that we are encouraged to have through cultivating a sense of learning new things, never stop learning, keep ourselves fresh, be exposed to new people, and plant new intentions for new seeds and new beginnings. And once we have given ourselves this new beginning to pleasure, which is not dependent upon the outer, which is very much rooted in the brahmacharya, which we learned about in the second chakra, then we have finally found some integration within ourselves, which empowers us in the ninth chakra with goddess Siddhidatri to be able to put all of our divine gifts or siddhis into service and into giving back out of gratitude for all the healing and transformation we ourselves have received on this journey. So Goddess Siddhidatri is very much revered by yogis, sages, and saints for imparting all the divine gifts that we have. Everything we have, everything that we are, is a gift to us from this divine consciousness. And as per the Vedic spiritual tradition, it's our duty, our purpose, our dharma, to be able to offer our actions in a spirit of what is called yajna, or a spirit of offering back our thanks to the 5 entities of life, which are Mother Nature, who we met in the first chakra, our ancestors, who are kind of represented by Skandamata and the biological mother connection, and then humanity, which is very much in need of our loving service, and from whose gifts we have benefited so much, right? Even to do this Zoom call, we wouldn't be able to do it without the person who invented Zoom. And the person who invented Zoom couldn't do it if there was no internet. And the person with the internet, it's all just so interconnected, and we're constantly benefiting from the gifts of humanity. And so to give back to humanity in need is considered our sacred duty and our sacred purpose. And also to give back to thanks to that divine consciousness and to our teachers and the sages who have guided us and led us on our journey. So that's really what we're taking inventory of here. Are what are those gifts that I have been given by the divine consciousness, and how may I be able to put those into action to be of service as a way to give thanks and to really lead with integrity, which in the Vedic tradition would be leading with humility, leading with gratitude, leading with a sense of being an instrument in a bigger scheme of things.
My very special guest today has been Ananta Ripa Ajmera, and the book is The Way of the Goddess. Let me just share with you a few more insights from the book. We've gone through some of the themes, but here is a list of the chapters. Let me pull it out. And then I just want to mention a couple of things more before we conclude. So, chapter 1, the power of practice. Chapter 2, channeling your energy. Chapter 3, igniting the fire of transformation. Chapter 4, the art of loving your true self. Chapter 5, expressing yourself with sound and silence. Chapter 6, defining and maintaining healthy boundaries. 7, transcending trauma with wisdom. 8, embracing new beginnings. 9, leading with integrity. And finally, she concludes with celebrating the victory of light over darkness. I hope it's not a permanent victory, because then
No.
that's the end. We don't want an ending. Evolution is a never-ending horizon. Now, the book is also has rituals. Rituals are a way of trapping energy, channeling energy, information, knowledge, and transformation. The book also has stories around each of these goddesses. There are beautiful illustrations, and there's a lot of very practical wisdom that we desperately need in this world right now, torn with violence, mechanized death, social, economic injustice, chronic disease, mental illness, and total absence of joy. So I very highly recommend this book, and I thank you, Ananta, for joining me. Any last words?
Well, I actually wanted to talk about the celebration of the victory over darkness, of light over darkness.
Please do.
This this is a really important step of the journey. It's not the end of the journey. It's the end of one cycle of the journey. It's meant to be a cyclical journey. So once we conclude, we are actually just integrating and celebrating all of the steps that came before, so that we're able to appreciate how far we've come on the journey, to be able to look back on it, and then to be able to take that as a catalyst for how to then move forward into a new cycle of the journey. So it's meant to be cyclical, it's meant to be continuous, it's meant to, continue on and to really never end. And that's what I love about it, because it gives us a sense of stability to know, okay, what this comes next, and yet we never fully master it, because life experiences will continue to give us new and different experiences to digest, right? And to be able to take through all these 9 steps. And then we do need to integrate, though, because that's again another digestive process that happens when we're able to be like, hey, so this is what happened. This is how it all goes together. And we can just be in awe on that day. I often find it's a day to be in awe and to be in wonderment. I personally love to go through this whole cycle every day. So every day I'll remember one version of Goddess Durga in order. So I go from 1 through 9. And then the 10th day is always, always, always a powerful day, because it's just the power of self-reflection, right? To really be able to take on the next battle, we have to feel empowered to go to the next step, right? And so it's really important, I feel, for everyone to celebrate the progress, because in a world that is so lacking in joy, it's ultimately the joy that we find from within and the celebration that we have within our own lives when there's no holiday maybe outside, that makes all the difference to give us the fire and the light and the inspiration to want to continue this difficult endeavor of transforming ourselves from the inside out. And it's also connected with your name. Deepak itself is actually the light, which is at the center of the Garba dance, which is the dance of the goddess that we do in the Hindu temples. And you had shown an illustration that this wonderful illustrator from the United Kingdom, Indian American woman named Gabby, had created, is a very symbolic dance. I never understood it, but it's actually representing with the Deepa Jyoti, the light at the center of the dance is symbolic of the womb of reproduction, which we all, regardless of our gender, have within us. And that womb of reproduction of the goddess at the divine level, not the physical level, but at the divine level, is all about the power that we all have within ourselves to really give birth to the most authentic version of ourselves. And so it's hugely significant and just so meaningful to be able to conclude with this, given that your name itself is
Yeah.
connected with that
Okay.
beautiful symbol of light.
Very kind. So here are some of the illustrations, and there are many more. Thank you so much. I think anyone and everyone can benefit from this beautiful book with all the illustrations, the rituals, the practices, the insights, and also the stories, both personal and mythical. Thank you very much, Ananta, and good luck and God bless.
Thank you so much. And thank you for all the ways that you've really pioneered the way for this book and so many other books and journeys to be able to be made from darkness to light, which is ever continuing onward. So thank you so, so much.
Thank you.